The Wind Begun to Rock the Grass by Emily Dickinson. The wind begun to rock the grass with threatening tunes and low. He threw a menace at the earth, a menace at the sky. The leaves unhooked themselves from trees and started all around. The dust did scoop itself like hands and threw away the road. The wagons quickened on the streets. The thunder hurried slow. The lightning showed a yellow beak and then a livid claw. The birds put up bars to nest. The cattle fled to barns. There came one drop of giant rain, and then, as if the hands that held the dams had parted hold, the waters wrecked the sky, but overlooked my father's house, just quartering a tree. Emily Dickinson's poem, The Wind Begun to Rock the Grass, reveals how helpless living things are vis-a-vis nature's might and ultimately God. In this poem, Emily Dickinson uses the imagery of a storm in personification to show that we are all at the mercy of God and the elements. This message is strengthened by our use of poetic techniques. Dickinson writes about God's control over nature. This control can be seen in the first stanza when she writes, "He threw a menace at the earth, a menace at the sky." Dickinson uses repetition of menace to emphasize the threat that God can command. This repetition draws your attention to who is giving out this threat: God. You are able to take in the words that she is using to express the idea of the threat in this stanza because of the alliteration of the T sound in through threatening tunes. This sound slows the poem down. Dickinson adds on to the idea of God controlling nature in the second stanza by showing how nature can erase the built environment. This concept is strengthened by the personification that Dickinson uses in the phrase, "The dust did scoop itself like hands and threw away the road." She uses personification because it expresses the idea that nature is in charge. People think of themselves as in charge of their environment, so when Dickinson uses this personification, she stresses this other reality. Later, Dickinson writes about the threat that nature poses to the human race. She writes about the effect of this threat and how nature controls it. In the third stanza, Dickinson uses a metaphor to heighten our natural fear of lightning. The lightning showed a yellow beak and then a livid claw. The image of the bird is made even more forceful because Dickinson adds in the word livid. An angry bird with claws is a symbol of a threat to humans, so this metaphor stresses the danger that God implies. Lastly, in the fifth stanza, Dickinson writes about how the individual is at the mercy of God's hands and how he spares man. She uses enjambment between the fourth and fifth stanza to exaggerate the anticipation of the approaching storm. This is important because the enjambment takes you through to the conclusion of the whole poem. When Dickinson writes that hell's the dam had parted hold, the waters wrecked the sky, she uses personification to create a clear image in your mind of how God's hands control nature and how nature can affect man-made things. This personification shows the result of God's power over nature and man. Thus, throughout this poem, Dickinson demonstrates the power that God has over living things. In just 5 stanzas, Emily Dickinson expresses a complete worldview including God, nature, and man through awe-inspiring imagery. I chose this poem because I found the sound of it beautiful. Like a song, it is continuous and harmonious. Although I love nature and often think about it, I have not spent much time thinking about God's role in the world. I most enjoyed this poem because it made me consider the meaning of God.